The Mortal Kombat series, as we all know, is one of the most popular fighting game franchises ever to exist in the video game space. And during its lengthy lifespan, the series has gone through many iterations, evolutions, with upgrades from 2D to 3D visuals, even with modern day graphics, and many spin-offs in between. Some decent and some that are questionable. But there were so many really good ideas that came from this iconic series that the evolution was just all but never ending and pretty much unstoppable. Moving away from the original 2D elements seen in original arcade games and even with ports on earlier 16-bit consoles, even some ports on lesser powered consoles with 8-bit systems as the Sega Master System and the like. It showed how popular the series was, and it tried to cater to so many different gaming players that could only access games in the series due to the consoles that they owned at the time, as not everybody had a PlayStation, not everybody had a Sega Saturn, not everybody had the ability or the access to play on an arcade machine. So it was inevitable for ports to be added to these systems. But somewhere along the line, things eventually had to change. While Mortal Kombat was pretty much the direct competitor to the iconic Street Fighter series, more predominantly Street Fighter 2, and with Street Fighter also going into a different realm with regards to 3D graphics that capitalise on the trend of the current generation with the PlayStation during the mid-90s. It would take a while for Mortal Kombat to catch up in some instances, but in 1997 we would get that transition with Mortal Kombat 4 that originally saw a release in the arcade but was later ported to various systems and platforms with the Windows PC, the Nintendo 64, PlayStation, Game Boy Color, and the game also got an upgraded version with Mortal Kombat Gold on the Sega Dreamcast sometime later that included a whole array of new features and tweaks to enhance the original qualities of the gameplay. So with the story of this entry in the game, it takes place sometime after the events of the original 3 games in the series that sees the character known as Shinnok escaping from the Netherrealm after being banished by the Elder Gods, and he wants to take over the entirety of the universe. So that's where the characters come into play to try and stop him. So you go through your typical tournament elements seen in previous games where you have to fight a multitude of different characters, with many returning faces such as Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Liu Kang, Raiden, among many others, while also introducing many new characters with their own unique abilities, special moves and fatalities. It would also be the first game in the series to introduce Quan Chi, a formidable opponent, but yet at the same time was also one of the catalysts for the series moving forward. With the game transitioning into 3D visuals, one of the main elements with the game and one of the things that it was looked upon with regards to reviews in the magazines is that the gameplay still played pretty much from a 2D perspective. Now you could transition around the plane or the environment in 3D, but you had to use various button presses in order to gradually move. You didn't have the freedom of movement to move within the environment compared to other fighting games that would have been seen on the likes of the PS3, especially if you compare it to the likes of the iconic Tekken games. There was even Bushido Blade, among many others, that allowed you to move around the environments in free time, whereas Mortal Kombat still played with that 2D perspective from the original games. But that would later change with later entries moving forward on the likes of the PS2 and even on modern systems. But regardless of those limitations, it doesn't take away from the gameplay. What you actually get in Mortal Kombat 4 is a frantic, fast-paced event, similarly seen in the earlier games. But this game, while it's the first in the series that's in 3D, for me personally, it's also one of the most insane and just frantic experiences that you can have in a fighting game on the console or on any platform. While the development tried to move away from some of the cartoony style elements that they would have seen in the previous games, even though they used like live action actors and photorealistic graphics, you can't help but deny some of the comedic elements and cartoon style qualities in terms of the animation seen in this 3D version of the game. If anything, that's one of its unique characteristics, and for me personally one of its best and funniest features, because when you look at certain animations and even in regards to some of the qualities regarding the fatalities and death moves, which they tried to implement by utilising different camera angles and different perspectives to just add more depth to each special move or fatality, and it added so much to the gameplay, almost to the point that yes, the fatalities were extremely gory in this version of the game compared to earlier entries, but it also in some cases made a lot of them insanely funny. that you would be laughing your head off at them, almost to the point that you would fall off a chair. You would be in stitches. Like, if you remember one of Quan Chi's death moves where he literally tears the opponent's leg off and he just beats the hell out of them until they're dead, and he just consistently just keeps beating them and beating them and beating them until literally the game is over, which is just absolute insanity and just mental. But that just shows you the depth of the insane nature of Mortal Kombat 4. For most of us, we would have only got to experience the game either in the arcade or mainly when it was ported to consoles. But for many, and I'm sure you'll agree, most of our first experiences with this game would have been on the iconic episode, or one of the final episodes of the legendary Games Master TV show that aired in 1997, that showcased people competing in a tournament where they were competing against each other on the arcade version of the game. And that was where you were introduced to the visual quality, the 3D graphics, the fast-paced, frantic nature of the game, but also you got to see some of the fatalities that were possible in the game. As some of the guys who were playing, some of them were just incredible. They just really knew how to play the game. They knew all the button combinations to implement some of the finishing moves in the game. Like, if you've ever played any of the games in the series, the multitude of button combinations is insane, just to not only do combos but also to do some of the fatalities. And you have to make sure that you're within a certain vicinity towards the opposing player, and you have to be standing beside them, or you have to be a small distance away in order to make the process work. And also it's all down to timing, because you have a very short and limited time frame in order to implement the button combinations in order to achieve success with the fatalities, and it will take a lot of practice to do so. But even for me, I first experienced the game through that TV show as well. I remember myself and my brothers and my mates sat down and we even recorded that episode of Games Master, and we would watch it repeatedly just to see that section with Mortal Kombat, just to see the guys playing in the tournament, because we were big Mortal Kombat fans at the time, and we just were so intrigued by how the game looked, and just because of the fact that it was the first of its kind in the series to be made in 3D, it was interesting to see what it would be like. Now, while it's not up there compared to the likes of the Tekken games and some other fighters on different systems, the game itself did get good reviews across all platforms it was released on. It doesn't have some of the controllable elements and some of the features that you would see in the likes of the Tekken series, among a few others, but what it lacks in different areas, it definitely makes up for in terms of its fun factor. Yes, it still has the same frustrating elements as seen in earlier Mortal Kombat games, where you can have an insane difficulty spike pretty much at any point in the game, either in the first fight or a couple of fights down the line, even on the easiest difficulty, that it's sometimes almost impossible to defeat opponents because they can nearly anticipate your every single move. The only advantage that you can have to some degree is that if you become familiar with a certain type of character, which for me personally would be Scorpion or Sub-Zero, and I think Scorpion is pretty much everybody's go-to character. I think he's everybody's favourite character in the series anyway, but he's also the easiest to pick up and play, and if you can utilise his moveset with his spear and the combinations or combo moves, you will be able to obliterate your opponents. But again, it's all dependent on skill, and there is a heavy amount of luck required in it too, because later on, especially on later difficulties or even on the easiest difficulty, like I said, if the difficulty ramps up during a fight, which it can do quite often, it will literally be down to your skill level that can get you through a situation. Sometimes you might have to try it multiple times before you'll get a good run at it, and I find that happened to me a lot back in the day. But I do remember playing this, like even going back to my earliest experiences playing Mortal Kombat 1 on the Sega Mega Drive, and even Mortal Kombat 2 then on the Mega Drive and Super Nintendo, and then I absolutely loved Mortal Kombat 3 on the Super Nintendo. A mate of mine had it, and for me that's my favourite version of Mortal Kombat 3. But I also then later did buy the PS1 version, which I have covered a previous video on the channel. I'll make sure to link it in the description, and for me that is definitely the closest to the arcade version that you can get, and it was considered that in the magazines. Now, while the PlayStation version of Mortal Kombat 4, it does come close to some degree, but it does lack in terms of certain elements, especially with the visual quality and a few other features. But it's definitely a capable title, and considering it did have limitations with regards to not being able to capitalise on certain features that you would have seen in other fighting games, it is a fun experience, mind you, in short bursts. But depending on which character you pick, you will be able to take advantage of different methods, mechanics, environments. And again, like the fatalities, what was really cool with this game was some of the environmental fatalities, like especially with some of the levels with the likes of the big fan on the wall, and you could literally throw them into it and it would just destroy them. Like, it was hilarious. And even seeing everything just going in fast motion, you couldn't really interpret what was going on. It was just, everything was just frantic and just completely over the top. To be totally honest, I just absolutely love the complete insanity and just over the top nature of this game. If anything, all of the games in the series, while the series does have that element to it, I think the Mortal Kombat 4 is definitely the pinnacle in the series in terms of its just complete craziness. It's mental in terms of its speed, its combos, its special moves, its fatalities. While they have become better, more detailed and more gory in later entries, but this first entry into 3D for me is definitely one of the most iconic in terms of its fun factor, because it will have you laughing in stitches the whole time, because the animations, everything about the game is just completely just cartoonish and just completely out there. Now, it may not be for everybody if you're a fan of fighting games, but it will appeal to a select few, and it will appeal to fans of the Mortal Kombat universe. It's definitely one of those games to add to your list if you haven't played it in a while, or if you've still yet to play it. But just note that it won't be an easy experience, because like all of the other Mortal Kombat games, with the difficulty spikes, and especially when you have to go through the game playing as each character to unlock additional features, while there is certain cheats and codes that you can use to unlock many of the game's hidden features, if you were to do it the long way, it will take you quite a while, let's just put it that way. But it is a fun game. I highly recommend that you play it, and I still consider it to be one of the most adept and best fighters still on the PlayStation 1, just for its fun factor alone. Plus, it's always a good blast to play with your mates, if that's what you're into as well. There's a great selection of characters. While there's not as many compared to the likes of the Mortal Kombat trilogy that would also have been released on the PlayStation, it still has enough characteristics of both new and old characters that you can choose from to add much depth to the gameplay. But I would love to know your thoughts of Mortal Kombat 4 for the PlayStation, or whatever version of the game you've played on what platform, whether you played it on the Nintendo 64, PC, or even if you played it, the upgraded version of Mortal Kombat Gold on the Dreamcast. I'd love to hear whatever stories you do have of this insane game, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around other types of fighting games that were also released on the PS1, which to be honest there is an insane amount, and I'm still discovering new games every day, then be sure to leave a like on the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and also check out the playlist on screen to see more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.